Hey, paisans, the time has come. On the air since 2009, the independently produced, non-FCC compliant champ of video game talk podcasting. Here comes Tiger Claw Radio. Here's your host, Critical Failure.
Yes, friends, it's episode 392 of Tiger Claw Radio. Yeah, 392 of these. It's hard for me to believe. So this week is the big end of June show. So we got my overall review of Super Mario Bros. 2 Japan, which was our game of the month, and also my sum up of Cuphead, which was the Cartridge Club game of the month. Our good friends over at Cartridge Club. On top of that, we got some chip tunes. Summer Chip Competition 11 over at Battle of the Bits is underway, and there's it's new, but there's a handful of submissions over there, so we're going to listen to some of those. Which is funny because the last one, the Spring Chip Competition, is still going. It's not, you can't submit anymore, but the voting phase is still up for another 4 days. So that's interesting. We'll hear a few of those chip tunes. And it's going to be a really good show. So let's start out with a chip tune. This is speed running a game you don't even like, from Cleater, who always delivers the goods. Here on Tiger Claw Radio. By the way, if you dig it, check out the notes. There should be a direct link to where you can go get yourself a copy of the MP3. Stick around. Guys, back again. The meat of the show really is the games of the month this week. Wrapping up June, we had a Super Mario Bros. 2 Japan here for the TCR crowd, and we had Cuphead for the Cartridge Club. And I did those I used the old Vancast format. It was done here at home, but I used my cell phone, and the idea was I wanted to pre-record them so that I didn't have to rush through it. I wanted to come up with real opinions one way or the other, which was my goal. Even if it's wrong, even if it's ill-informed, whatever, has to be a real opinion. It's great because it's good. So we're going to dig into those three recordings now, and the first one is off topic of the two games of the month. So those will be coming up later. Stick around, you're listening to TCR. Here's one for you. I just kind of had enough this past week, and I started utilizing the hide game feature in Steam. Now, this has been around for a long time, and I've used it a little bit. There have been a couple of things that I would right-click and then do hide game. Typically, it was something I would reserve for certain games, how they have like the beta version in a separate entry. Like Dota's that way. Dota 2 has like its main game, and then there's like Dota 2 test version. And I never wanted to play the test version, so I just hit it. But that was really it. I went through and just decided to hide every game in my collection that I just had zero interest in ever. I'm not talking about things I don't want to play right this moment, or things that I'm not interested in right now. Because I've got a lot of weird games that I go back to every once in a while, or would like to get around to playing at some point. I'm talking about the garbage games, the bundle fodder, the stuff that, it's like, how did I even get this? Yeah, so I went through and started hiding stuff. When all was said and done, 411 games are now hidden on my Steam account. That's a quarter of my collection. Just about. A little less than a quarter of my collection. I'm shocked. It's pretty crazy. First of all, it took a lot of work to do that. But now that it's done, it reduced the noise in my collection. The goal was to get rid of the games that I just look through. The ones that my eyes don't even see while looking through my collection. I wanted to get rid of those. And now that I've done so, looking at this, it's like there are games here I kind of forgot I had. That it's really cool. It's a cool feeling. So I wanted to make sure and talk about this on the air because there's a few of us who listen to this who are fellow Steam users who have large collections. I mean, by this time, I think most Steam users over a couple of years have a pretty sizable collection. I would recommend this to any Steam user. Take an afternoon if that's what it takes. Just look for the games that you have no interest in. And I gotta say, now that I've done that, if I go to the option that, to look at the hidden games, just exclusively the hidden games, it's really, it's something to see. It is really something to see. I know I've made the right choice when I do it because I look at my hidden games and I try to imagine myself looking at like a list of 25-cent Steam games. And if there's anything there that I would buy for 25 cents, then you unhide it. Because the idea is that is a tiny iota of interest in a game you might want to play one day. Otherwise, it stays hidden. Because if it's a hidden game, you can always go back and unhide it. That's not gone forever. You're not bound to the same permanent decision as writing out to Steam support and asking them to remove a game, which I've actually done before once. Actually, yeah, I did that once, but it was 10 years ago. So I don't know if they would still do it or not, to be perfectly honest. I kind of want to try it just to see if it would still work. Go pick out one of my 400 plus games I'm not interested in and just get rid of it. But here's another thing that's worth mentioning. A long time ago when we were working on the Next Round podcast, one of the gimmicks we had was we would find some way to randomly select a Steam game. And the presence of these games, I think, is what made that gimmick a terrible chore. Because whenever we played that game, my random game would be one of these 400. And I just wouldn't want to touch it. And, that was ultimately the fate of it. Now I feel like if there was some way to randomly select from only my visible games, I think that'd be a great idea. I don't know how that would work because the tool we used to use, I think, is gone. And even if it wasn't gone, I think it would read everything associated to the account. It wouldn't quite work the same way. I'd have to figure it out. It could be done with dice or something like that. But I don't know. Yeah, I just wanted to share that because that simple act has gone a long way into making my Steam collection more usable. All right, that's all I got for now. Back to the studio. See you there. Back again in the studio, and I gotta say, when I woke up this morning, that was recorded yesterday. When I woke up this morning and started combing through my Steam collection, for something to play before I, started my day, the whole thing just felt so much better and clearer. I can't recommend doing that enough. All right, let's get to the goods. Cuphead. All right, we're talking about Cuphead. I think Cuphead is the ultimate proof that I have become a filthy casual. Because it's not flawless, but it's one of the few games that really does live up to a lot of the hype that it got. And this was a really, really hyped game. Usually this kind of hype behind a video game, regardless if the game's good or bad or not, turns me off to it. But everybody was playing Cuphead when it came out. All the big YouTubers were doing their Let's Plays. And once I finally got it installed and started playing it, I mean, yes, it's difficult, but one of the things that kind of mitigates that difficulty is that the controls are really tight. So that eases it somewhat, but that's not the only thing. The bosses, when you play these boss levels, the ones that go straight to the boss, when you die, you're only losing the damage progress, okay? That part I was okay with, because you can do a string of deaths. You're not really being sent back that far. And once you learn the patterns, you can knock them out pretty quickly. I mean, you see speed runs of the game or whatever, people who are like getting through it without getting hit and that kind of crazy stuff. They do it really quickly once the patterns are down. The part where Cuphead falls apart for me is the run and gun stages. This is where I have a real problem with it, because the bosses really are the main draw, for one thing. And the bit that keeps me playing, keeps me dealing with the difficulty, that forgiving nature of the boss rush is gone with the run and gun stages. So there's a few where they have a run and gun stage and there's a boss at the end. So if you have any difficulty with that stage, you got a boss at the end that, you're going to have to go through that stage, 10, 20, 30, 40 times, however many. I'm just not doing that. I'm sorry. I can't think of a more clear example of artificial difficulty. You know what I mean? And it sucks to say that, because it's also clearly not a game that was rushed. It's the prime example of a game where the developers had a clear vision and took their time to make sure it was realized, but it's a bad design choice. I'm sorry, it is. Do a tough stage with no checkpoints. Do a tough boss, but don't do both. I get it. That's the way difficulty was in back in the old days, the old school gamers. But as old school gamers, when we were actually young and dealing with that, it wasn't like a good thing. I don't remember anybody saying like, wow, isn't it awesome how, crazy, stupid, difficult Super C is? Isn't that the best aspect of Super C, how unplayably difficult it is? No. So that was the one glaring fault with Cuphead. So does that make it unplayable? No. But what happens for me is that I go into a game like that realizing at the start that I'm not going to beat it. Just because, hey, super difficult game, that's fine. I'm not a super great gamer, but I still kind of want to see what it's like. Okay, that's fine. If that's the attitude you're going to take, like I did, then chances are it's going to be the run and gun stages that actually separate you from, the people who can concentrate their childlike wonder hard enough to actually beat Cuphead. Fun game. It does have a 2-player simultaneous mode. I tried it with my son. We could not do it, just because what happens is the first person to die has to sit and wait for the other person to play through the game or play through the level, either win or lose or whatever. So there was a skill gap between the two of us, and my son would die because he's younger. and he didn't like sitting and waiting while I finished my turn. Now, that was an issue we ran into. I've heard reports of other parents playing through with their kids and having a good old time. So it's just a matter of how patient you are, or how patient the lesser good of the two people are. But I do appreciate that mode is there, because historically, especially with side scrollers, there's a lot of games that could be 2 players or would benefit greatly from having 2 players that just don't. So yeah, that's Cuphead in a nutshell. It's another one of those games that goes on sale, but never for a whole lot. So I wouldn't ever expect to find Cuphead for less than like $13 or $14. Might be $15. You'd have to check Steam DB or whatever it is, the external service that monitors the sales. But by and large, 25% off is the norm. Good game though. Good game though. Make sure you check out the Cartridge Brothers if you want to follow along with the games they play. They have much more of a discussion. So my hat is off to them. They do a great job. Let's check out Super Mario Bros. 2 Japan, wrapping up June here on TCR. Okay, let's talk about Super Mario Bros. 2 Japan. This was an interesting one because a lot of us pulled it out and gave it a shot. Like, I'm kind of shocked at the participation we had, because this is another one of these games that's like historically not fun to play. So at this point, if you put in Super Mario Bros. 2 Japan or Lost Levels, whatever, if you're putting that in a machine or booting it up or loading it up or whatever you do, this is accepted to not be a good time. It's accepted to be fun or not unfun. It's accepted to be unfair. It's accepted that it's difficult. So that fact is very different from Cuphead. Okay. This is before input 1, graphic 1, the mindset going into the game. So what happened? Well, the big thing that people forget, unless you actively go back and play Nintendo games, is that the original Super Mario Brothers didn't have really great physics. Now, it did for the time, because it was really the big game that took like platformers and brought them to the side-scrolling format. But the jumping physics, the running physics, they weren't really perfected until the later games. And if you go back and play Super Mario Bros. 1 now, you'll see what I'm talking about. It's not a bad game. It's just, it suffers from being a game from the 80s. So the first thing I noticed right away, because I started with Cuphead, and then I went back to Mario Bros. 2 Japan, is I was like, whoa, it does not have that forgiveness of the tight controls. I think super tight controls really are a necessity if you're going to have a mega hard game. At least Super C had that. Super hard platforming, very bad level design, artificial difficulty, whatever. But if I jumped, I was pretty sure I could tell where I was going to land. That's not the case for Mario Bros. 2 Japan. Speaking of design choices, it is really the design choices where this game falls short. One of the things that came up a lot when I would talk with other people about this is, hey, this is a ROM hack. This is not a game. And I guess, there's some truth to that, because when you look up how it was originally distributed, it was not actually a Nintendo game or a Famicom game. It was a Famicom Disk System game, right? So it didn't have the same kind of release as, say, a Super Mario Bros. 1 or Super Mario Bros. 3 or, one of those main series Nintendo games. Kind of had an afterthought sort of release to it. It makes sense that it turns up on the Lost Levels, or it turns up on Mario All-Stars, more like a bonus feature rather than an actual game. And that's what it is. It's a bonus feature. So when you hear the developers, and when I say the developers, I'm talking about like Shigeru Miyamoto, all those, Satoru Iwata, whatever, those guys, those Nintendo names who had been around in the 80s, they talk about the first Super Mario Brothers, where it was supposed to be like the very first level. There was this attitude where it was like, we want to show the player how the game works. so that when they get to the next level, they kind of know what to expect, all those sorts of things. All that's gone. The overall attitude, the design philosophy of Super Mario Bros. 2 is very much troll the player. Very much troll the player. Which I think is very different from artificial difficulty. Because artificial difficulty, the player, in theory, should be able to get through it. Oh yeah, you can beat that Cuphead level. In theory, you just have to play it enough times to learn the pattern and you'll get through it. Never mind the fact that you won't be able to memorize the pattern because you have to play through this previously difficult level to even get there. But yeah, on paper, everything should be fine. No. This is trolling, okay? The mushrooms, the poison mushrooms, if you actually play the Disk System version, they look almost exactly like the real mushrooms. They made them easier to spot if you played the All-Stars version. Also, I didn't experience this. This is something Hemrock said in one of his emails. One of the levels you can clear the flag, jump all the way over the flag, and if you do that, guess what? There's a warp pipe there. Well, where does this take us? It takes us back to the beginning of the game. Why would you do that except to troll the player? So in that aspect, it's kind of interesting to go back and play it, because there were a lot of games that had difficulty from bad design choices, but this one is actually like them being jerks. There weren't too many examples of games just straight up being jerks. They knew how to make a decent game. This is not like it was born from a lack of design skill. They just were jerks. I don't know. So when I played it, I very much had the feeling that somebody was being a jerk to me. That's why it's not a fun game. I didn't get very far. I got as far as the first castle, and I did make it through the first castle, but I died immediately following that, like right away. Like I made it through the first castle with 1 life, and then I died in like the first couple seconds on the following stage. And when that happened, I put the game aside, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to pick this up again. And I never picked it up again, and that was enough. It was enough. I wanted to go back to it, because I wanted to have more to say about the game. But we returned to our original concept that I knew full well going in. This was going to be an unfun experience. And you know what? It didn't disappoint. So that's Super Mario Bros. 2 Japan. If you dig up the actual Disk System version, first of all, if you want to play the ROM, that means you're going to have to find BIOS for the Famicom Disk System, which is an extra step that I had to figure out. That old version means less lives. It means that a more difficult time spotting the poisonous mushrooms, and that's about it. So if you really want to try it, I would wholeheartedly recommend going with the Lost Levels version found on Super Mario All-Stars. But that's just me. And with that, that's the end of my review. And coming up next month, we have the original Final Fantasy, which should be a much more pleasant experience. Back again in the studio. We are past the 20-minute mark. It's just just taking a quick minute to thank the sponsors. This is a Patreon-sponsored program. These individuals give of their resources to make sure this little rinky-dink outfit can come back every single week. So to them, I offer early access to the show. Comes out Wednesday for them, following Monday for everyone else. And also on Patreon, I do a weekly series called Monday Night Morrowind, and then there's a few other extras. Finally, as an old tradition here on TCR, I read their names off on a hall of distinguished gentlemen, and they are Hemrock, Tecmo Balls, Darabka, and Eric Kentroller. Thank you all so much for contributing and keeping the lights on. I hope you're enjoying the party. Coming up, we have the fail bag, but first let's do another track from the Battle of the Bits Summer Chip 11 I want to say compilation, but I should say competition, but it's both, I guess. Whatever. This is A64 with Secret Self. You're listening to Tiger Claw Radio. back again on TCR. Check out the description if you want to get a copy of that MP3. It's time for the fail bag. There's a couple places you can do it if you want to reach out to the show. You can head over to YouTube and leave a comment. Also, I have a Discord channel that I don't talk up much, but if you have difficulty with YouTube blotting out your comments or links or whatever, you can go over to Discord and leave something there. Or if you know me personally, you can shoot me an email as long as you're clear about what I can and can't read on the air. We're going to do Discord first. We got 2 from Swingle. He did one last week after the show had already been finalized for the supporters. So he says, which 50-cent game did you pick up during the summer sale? There are 28,000 to choose. And Steam's summer sale. So I got a couple of games, but when it comes to 50-cent games, I only got one, and I want to get the name right. It was a slot machine game. Vegas Slot. Very simple. It's a slot machine, and nothing more and nothing less, and it's 50 cents. And I played it for 69 minutes, apparently, and I got my money's worth. So, yeah, that was the only one. I looked at a couple, but, I mean, at the 50-cent price range, and you and I talked about this, it's very difficult to separate the garbage from, like, the actual playable games from hobbyist developers. And we don't really have a way to do that, so... yeah, Vegas Slot it is. And what's worse is there are a couple of games that are just already in my collection that would have been viable 50-cent games, but I don't know what they are anymore. I'd have to check the store pages of every one of my games, and that's just not going to happen. But he follows up. He says, TCR... 391 cross-posting in case YouTube eats my hate speech. And I saw this on YouTube, so I would have gotten it, but I'm glad you posted it here as well. At 43 minutes, N64 talk. The 64 was a bad console with good games in spite of it. I believe you are so clueless about the N64 that you shouldn't even pretend to know what the bulk of the system had to offer. Oof. As a final insult, the games you prefer weren't widely available on the N64. Clouding your judgment. Stand your ground, everybody. Stand your ground. This is the way Swingle is. He's a straight shooter. It's good because I know I can trust him not to BS me, but sometimes this is how it comes across. So it's okay. This is Swingle. Gonna finish the comment and then I'm gonna reply to my old buddy. He says, now for me to pretend I know what I'm saying. The N64 was great when developers didn't utilize the system's gimmick, the analog stick. That thing was a hazard to all thumbs worldwide, and they really had no excuse for using such rigid plastic. Outside of the need for gaming gloves, some of the best games for the system were sport-related. Blitz had a great port. Jai Lai Golf, NBA Courtside with Kobe, Extreme G. I truly believe if you cared for sports, you wouldn't dog the N64. I'm conflicted about other genres because their PS1 counterparts tended to be better. But there are several exclusives that were also good. The big issue I had with N64 is the pricing, since they are all overvalued. To me, that is where your disdain really shines. All the games from the N64 era have been replicated or enhanced simply due to avoiding the pitfalls of the hardware. The graphics card required everything to be 3D when the hardware couldn't really handle it. Devs had to fake sprites in 3D because they couldn't make games as pretty as a result. Because I sold my N64 19 years ago, I'm struggling to remember all the titles, but I could make a top 50 of games worth playing on that system if I had the master list. If you are trying to legally play the games on that list, you will be disappointed at the price demand for such games. Read my response to Death Adder for further details. I don't think the N64 is great for price reasons, but it did have a large library of good games. Ooh. Oh my gosh. The gloves are on, Swingle, old buddy. I'm coming after you, man. Alright. So, I still have my Nintendo 64. So there's that. First of all, what was it you said? If I truly cared about sports games, you wouldn't dog the N64. Well, I don't. So, yeah, that I will continue to dog them for that reason. Furthermore, when it comes to these old systems with sports games, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't the Dreamcast really superior in that department? I know it was when it came to football, because The Dreamcast having the VMU on the controller, you were able to use that to pick out plays, so you could do local multiplayer football games with a little bit more. You could, what's the word? Anonymity when you're choosing your plays. I mean, I know they make it so that you can't really tell, like if you're playing like Sega Genesis or something, like a Madden game on Sega, but you can tell when the other person is like pulling out the special teams or something, that sort of thing. Like so there's that. But to be perfectly honest, you're right. I don't care about sports games, so I wouldn't mark that as a plus or a minus. I wouldn't weigh that at all when I'm evaluating a system. But let's throw the BS aside. This is really how I came to this conclusion, okay? A couple of years back, I got my Sega Master System as a gift from Sendu. He sold it to me, but he sold it to me for super, super mega cheap. It was like $10 or something. I think when it comes down to it, he just didn't want to pay the shipping, which is great. And when that happened, I got back into collecting physical games for a little while. As a result, at one point, there I was with me and my Nintendo 64 trying to figure out if that was a viable system for me to pursue getting games for. I actually did get a couple of games for it. Primarily Perfect Dark, which I don't have the RAM upgrade, so I can play Perfect Dark, but I can only play like bot matches with the like multiplayer game bot matches. I can't do the campaign without the RAM upgrade. And while we're on the subject, the fact that the RAM upgrade exists, I think, is another strike against the 64. I'm not saying there aren't good games for it. There are. Another one is Jet Force Gemini. Okay, we had the 64 when I was a kid. Jet Force Gemini was a game that the other kids around the neighborhood came out of the woodwork to play. It also had a really good port of Quake 2, and I know it's like first-person shooters that got ported to consoles are generally laughable, but Quake 2 on the 64 was really good. Quake 1 on the 64 was also not that bad. I remember, despite its limitations, I remember playing that with Engie and really enjoying it. Blast Corps was kind of fun. We had WWF Attitude for the 64. That was one we enjoyed, but now we're back in the territory of, okay, this was on a couple of different systems, and it was probably better on the PS1, because one of the things that made those games charming was their like hilarious VMUs, and all of those were absent from the N64 system. What it boils down to was, in that time, I opened up the Webernet, and I was like, let's just look at Nintendo 64 games. I did not find things that appealed to me. I didn't. There are a couple of really, awesome games. Super Mario 64, that's an awesome game. The two entries in the Zelda franchise, although they didn't resonate with me, they're favorite games. But that's three. I don't know, man. I don't know. It didn't resonate with me. You could say it's because I'm clueless. That's fair. That is fair. But I know in that moment, this was something I looked into, and I was looking at maybe at the time I was looking at games that I could actually afford, and that's why there wasn't anything, and that would play into your point. But it was a weird system. It was very weird. The analog stick that you're talking about, I had problems with that too. I think everyone did. But my problem wasn't really the rigid plastic. Maybe it stems from the rigid plastic. But the issue was the stick would go limp at some point. There was like part of the ball joint. It was a ball and socket joint connection, and something would break in that. So the stick would it would still work, but it would fall limp from its socket. And that was usually like the second player controller that you gave everyone, at least in my house. And that was always ridiculous to me, because I would see controllers being sold as fully functional with that sort of limp stick issue. I don't know. I feel like I don't think it's fair for me to say to say that I'm totally clueless about the N64 being a bad console. Has a handful of games, but let's say this: I'll say this, Swingle, and I say this in good spirits because I do respect your opinion. I know you're a smart guy, even though I disagree with you here. I do challenge you to come up with 50 games. I challenge you to do that. Because I know there's 20, but I don't think there's 50. I don't. I don't know. You're a smart guy. Let's see what you come up with. That's all that's on Discord. Swingle, despite our disagreements, I appreciate that you're a straight shooter. And never lose that, please. Let's go over to YouTube and see what everyone else has to say. And we actually beat it together. Man, it's a tough game. I think you might have watched me and my son play it, actually. You know what? I think you're right. I think I may have indeed. Yeah, you're a more... CF here. I lost some audio in the recording, and I'm not exactly sure what happened, but there's a little chunk which might have an entire comment just completely gone. So, yeah. Back to the fail bag. Thanks for listening. 11, thanks, I hate it. You are on the cutting edge, which is super cool. Death Adder says, is there really a console war mentality between Steam, Epic Games, and GOG? Aren't they just all free apps on the same box? Epic Games seems okay in my book. I pick up all their free games and add them to my account. Grand Theft Auto 5, Sonic Mania, Control, Batman Arkham games. All free video game rentals that'll probably never touch, but I appreciate. Video game glitches. I remember the final boss in The Suffering. One of the bosses kept having trouble spawning. It was super weird. The Suffering is an original Xbox game worth checking out if you haven't. As for my old Dead by Daylight addiction, billions of glitches. One time playing as the hag tarp went off and launched me into the sky above the trees somehow. It was awesome. Another DVD glitch, I recall, it's kind of hard to explain. The best I can describe it is the character model for Kate was blown up and across the level. It was one of the most scary things I had ever seen in the game. You are incorrect, Critical Failure. The Nintendo 64 not being good and only having 15 good games is an old meme and a false statement. Unironically, in my top 3 consoles. Where's my 64 Chads at? Yeah. Swingle replies, in regards to the 64, I'd say the Nintendo 64 is bad in the same way every console being bad for the majority of players. When comparing the limited amount of games one is usually exposed to, I would have been disappointed in every Nintendo console. Most shoppers buy up to 10 games brand new. There are very few games released on any console that demand a must-have price tag getting a new. When buying mostly used, I can't really think of a single console that was bad. Maybe Neo Geo, since that was expensive, regardless of new versus used. And as for internet rental wars, people don't like having multiple accounts for their games. There are roughly 8 different PC platforms for all this crap. So people tend to argue on which one is better for the sake of limiting how many accounts they need to maintain. I mean, just look at yourself and you'll see which kettle is black based on your refusal to play games with any of us in the PC Master Race. Even if the game had full controller support, which I'm really saying is you complete me, and you should stop being faithful to your console marriage. Anyways, elitism is everywhere, console and PC. Death Adder replies, based Swingle filled. Fair enough. Yeah. I have a Dead by Daylight glitch story as well. This is when I was maining Dwight, and I escaped in one game. This was before they did the update where there was a time limit on matches. So I escaped the match, but walking outside did not trigger the end event. So I was able to just freely explore the area outside of the gate, which was weird. And that lasted for a couple minutes until I got bored and then walked back to the gate area where the event then triggered. So that's my Dead by Daylight glitch story. Good game, though. Death Adder, good to hear from you. I will at some point get back on Skype. I never use Skype. I know that's where you're at. We'll hook up and do a Rasslecast. Desm says, at 43 minutes, I don't think you're off base at all. We got an N64 Christmas after it was released, and we liked it a lot the first year, but it quickly lost interest from me. Like you said, there were a few games I liked, but the games like DK64 and Banjo were annoying collectathons, for me anyways. For me, and I always felt the graphics were way ugly compared to the PS1 and Saturn. Nowadays, with upscalers and fancy emulation, N64 looks pretty ugly, and it doesn't run well for several games in the library. I'm not fond of it at all. I traded the old N64 for my Xbox 360, and I'm much happier with that. P.S. Thanks for the shout-out, dude. yeah, man, I don't know. Some people like it, some people don't. I don't know. I had fun with it, but now as an adult collector, there's not much there for me. Gaming Beast says, I think GOG Galaxy is fine for what it is. It works smoother than Steam, honestly. I only the only re3 I cared for was when they announced MK3 in a magazine, literally 20 years ago. A trillion years in internet time. I do enjoy the cringe reel made by them, but I still hate the OCP corporate streak. I don't care as much for new games until I replace my aging rig. Until then, I have fun with my old games instead. Been having fun with Neverwinter Nights as of late. Thinking of recreating the Village of Greenspan with that one day. Good times, man. Good times. Yes, I have also returned to Neverwinter Nights. Which I actually also bought for Android because it went down to $1.99 on the Google Play Store. So I went ahead and picked it up. Just, I know you can't play it on a phone, but because the screen is too small, but, Android boxes have been a point of interest for me, so now it's in my collection. Interestingly enough, if you pick it up off of Android and you try to you go inside the game, you go to like where you would purchase premium modules, it takes you to a duplicate of the Steam page with the Steam banners and everything. Then that's how you get the DLC for Android. It's very weird. Swingle says at 43 minutes. Okay, this is a duplicate of the Swingle comment that we read from the Discord server. So I think that's about it for the fail bag, if I'm not mistaken. All right. This really being the end of the fail bag, let's talk about some things that happened over this past week. Just, this is how, when I was coming up, other podcasts would really start their show. What have you been playing this past week? Well, here it is. I've been interested in developing for a while. Just as a hobbyist, I have some professional programming experience, but I don't really have any games that are from me that are really out there, aside from an RPG Maker demo and then like a really small RPG Maker mini game that's been out there for a while. What I really want to do, more than anything, is I wanted to develop games for OpenDingux. That's really what I wanted to do. That being the system that's used on all of these handhelds that are coming out of China right now that are primarily emulation machines. And not to beat a dead horse, but what I love about these systems is they're entirely unregulated, and it's a wide open market for new development. So they're commonly thought of as you get all the ROMs and steal them all or whatever and put them on the machine. That's fine, but you can also get newly developed NES ROMs for $1 or $2 a piece or whatever. Well, there are native games made for these things, but they're all from 2015 or something like that. So it's like, how do you make those games? It's just a Linux system, right? But there's nobody else doing it right now, and there's not a lot of there's not a lot of reading material out there. So I don't see it happening. And apparently it's not as simple as just making a Linux game and then porting it over, which sucks. So the only real way to make a game for those is to do like GB Studio and make new Game Boy games, or NES Studio and make new NES games. And apparently there is a Super Nintendo Studio or an SNES Studio in the works, so we can see some more small SNES games coming around, which I'm super excited for. That would be super amazing. But barring that, since I can't really put new games on those old systems, I want to give game development another shot. A long time ago in one of these sales, I picked up a retail copy of Game Maker, which you can't even get anymore. And also there's another one called Godot, which is completely free. And I want to give game development another shot, especially now that I know that itch.io has a bunch of assets that you can get, not just for free, but there's reasonably priced assets that you can use. I've been doing this this record label thing for a while, and working with a lot of compilations. And the compilations kind of opened my eyes, and I learned how to go out and meet people and make a product that is, the result of several different people's work. And I think ultimately that's how a game can be made. I can, if I can get something made, I can, I can get something that works, and then I can source out some of the areas that to individuals who can do things better than me. I've got no problem paying somebody to come up with a couple of good sprites, to replace whatever I've made, and that would enable me to, make my dream game, whatever. Just as a hobbyist, just make some free games and whatnot. So I just downloaded this Godot thing yesterday. I'm gonna take a look and compare it to Game Maker Studio again. See what I come up with, but I don't know. I'm interested in giving game development another try. I had a lot of fun working with RPG Maker a month ago or so, and I really wanted to get back to that. But every RPG Maker game is an RPG Maker game and can really be nothing else. And that is, I think, ultimately the limitation there. So we'll see. I don't know. I just got the bee in my bonnet to give it another try, and we're going to see what comes of it. That's TCR for this week. Thanks to everybody who chilled out and listened to us talk about some video games, and yeah, it's been good. I hope you guys had a good June, and have a great July. Thanks so much for listening. I'll see you next week.